Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is the author of the Diamond Dragons books, and as you'll learn throughout the interview, there is more to Diamond Dragons than just the series of books. His name is Matthew Carauddo, and my interview with Matthew will follow the note-taking sounds. Matthew Carauddo, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Hi there. Thanks for having me aboard.
Your book series is the Diamond Dragons series. What genre of books is the series in? And without spoiling too much about the series, what is the series about?
Right. So that's a pretty clear question that people will ask, but when people visit the website, which is diamond-dragons.com, they'll be able to see that, clearly this is epic fantasy. There's some other elements going on in there that I won't obviously reveal now, but people might pick up on as they, depends on what they're going to do. If they look at the website, if they look at all the videos that I've created, I've made several video teasers for each of the books thus far. When I release them, there's also chapter artwork teasers. Something that's unique about my series of books is, in addition to it just being, of course, storytelling in the form of written words, there's just hundreds of illustrations. Non-AI, I'm proud to say, especially at this point in the in the game. I pretty much create all the illustrations myself. I do hire some other artists who are listed on the website. I've hired some in the past to I'll email one of my associates, I want to get a drawing of this thing. I don't think I could do it myself. What do you think, to some of my artists? And it's a great fun to work with them on these things. But my background, just to give your listeners an idea, is 30 plus years in production. And what do I mean by that? I mean, directing, acting, writing, sound design, video editing, even electronic props of all things, and costuming. Extensive costuming. I used to suit up as, of all things, Darth Vader and Kylo Ren and various Jedi, Luke Skywalker, all this stuff. And I did several years, almost a decade worth, I would say, of live Star Wars style performance work with, these bright LED sabers that I would create and bring aboard all my shows, and we would, beat the hell out of them on stage and everything. And it kind of was, a thing, a rabbit hole to go down back in the day when, at the time, it was only just then, but basically around 2005, becoming possible for that to occur without, you have a really dim saber on stage, or you'd immediately break it in half. So that was quite a thing to do, but that was part of my previous background. So there's just a plethora of things that I have done over these 3+ decades.
An interesting way that you handle releasing the Diamond Dragons books is that they're timed with Earth solstices. How is the release schedule for the Diamond Dragons books structured, and why are they structured with the solstices?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some people have asked me about that before too, which is always nice if they pick up on that interesting little detail. So to put it simply, there's like 3 major things. The first one is that the solstices keep me very vigilant about my deadlines, and I like that. I've always been that kind of artist in the past where again, my background is in theater, and in theater you have live productions, and you can't usually push them, right? When you're like, yo, our first performance is on this date, you can't be like, but I don't feel like it, I'm kind of sick, and they'd be like, we got to get this done, So the solstices keep me vigilant, and I can't push them, right? I can't change them. So I don't want to miss them, and I haven't thus far. Book 1, I released the digital version over summer solstice, and then, of course, book 1, the print versions were released on the winter solstice of 2021, and so on, 2022, 2023, 2021, et cetera, et cetera. And my intentions are to kind of, keep to that until I'm kind of done with the series, which is, I'm not 100% sure if I'll finish with book 6 and be done with it. I might, hashtag question mark. entertain the idea of doing books 7 and 8, but we'll see. But so that's the first reason. The second reason that the solstices are so important is they factor into the storytelling itself. The dragons of the story, they're in their own universe, their own planet, and so on. And without going into great detail, they have their own solstices and equinoxes and other weird and bizarre celestial events, things where they have two moons for their planet and whatnot, but other things are going on. Their planet is demonstrably different from Earth. So that, and then the third one really is, I just found it to be kind of fun that I was like, this is really awesome. Like, not only will it keep me disciplined and consistent with the releases, but it's just cool. Like, if someone's like, hey, Matthew, when's your next book? So I'm like, when do you think they're coming? And they'll be like, oh yeah, the solstices. Or someone even suggested before, they're like, oh, you should do something on the equinoxes. And I was like, oh, Gavot, I don't know if I have the strength, It's like, oh my God, I mean, it's hard enough to release them, essentially every half year. I can imagine if I, did four things per year. Wow.
Were one or more constructed languages, and I'm asking this question because I noticed there were some greetings in some of on parts of the website that looked like they were in a constructed language, but were there one or more constructed languages developed for the Diamond Dragons project? And if so, what was it like to develop a constructed language or languages?
Right, that's a good question as well, Aaron. And I did work on essentially a new language, which kind of makes sense when you think of, I mean, pretty much all heroes' journeys, especially like things like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, this kind of thing. There's, all these bizarre languages and whatnot because we're working on that level. There's, fantasy or in some cases sci-fi going on. And so you're expecting these interesting languages to be a part of it. And since my books essentially revolve entirely, well, almost around dragons, it makes sense that they would have their own language and no, they are not speaking English or French or something. But that said, when I wanted to work on the language, I was looking for clever ways to make the words familiar enough so that you as a human could plausibly understand it in the sense that once it's explained, you'd be like, oh, cool, I get it. That word means hello, or that word means dragon, or blah, 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 blah. But if people look closely enough at not all of the words, but 90% of them, they might catch that they'll be like, wait, that word is suspiciously like the Latin origin for this, or the French origin for this, or the German or the Japanese or something. And what they'll find is instead of it being like, well, it's all Latin based, and there you go, or it's all French, or whatever, I actually borrow from a whole bunch of different languages and have kind of made that sort of not necessarily a running theme, but it's just like, for example, they say nay or nayest for no, and nay is Swedish for no. So that's a pretty simple one. So anyone who is Swedish, might immediately look at it and say, oh, that's cool. They basically used our word for no, nay, nay, nay. And that's just one small example. Other ones, it's a lot more, what's the right word for it? Not devious, I guess devious could be it, but just more subtle and nuanced. I've used some Japanese words that mean demon, or a word that means shadow, something like that, to kind of eke in a crazy name for like an evil creature, or in some cases it's for a butterfly or something, whatever. So there's a lot of that going on. And in addition to that, not to go on for too long with this, I also created sort of a numeric system. But none of these things, by the way, just to be clear for audiences, are like required. It's not like once you start reading, you'll be like, wait, do I have to memorize a bloody new language? I'm like, no, you don't. It's helpful. And of course, throughout the reading, you'll become familiar enough to understand a lot of the basics. I make it, repeated enough so that you're made to understand not only through, excuse me, through context, but just for the fact that you'll be like, okay, like if you don't know that that word means dragon by now, what are you doing? You haven't been paying attention.
Did the Diamond Dragons books, in particular, the first one, start out as screenplays? And if so, what was it like to adapt the screenplays into a novel format for the books?
Yeah, that's another good question. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, so I originally intended just to write screenplays for this series. And I won't go into all the reasons for that, but I will say this and try to make it clear to anyone who's listening is that although all too often people will hear, oh, I heard, this is a book first and then they adapted it into a screenplay and so on. I mean, I just understand that crafting books is ridiculously more difficult than drafting up a screenplay. And that means, by the way, whether you're making what's called a screenplay, which is usually just like the basic one, then there's such a thing as called the shooting script. And that's when, suddenly camera directions and all sorts of interesting details should enter that game. And they're usually not what you start with unless you're actually in production and someone's optioned you and all this kind of stuff. And I won't go into all that, but the point for me initially was, I wanted to get this skeletal structure down. I didn't have any intentions in the beginning, and this is to kind of set the tone back in 2018 and 2019 about doing. I didn't want to do a book, so I was working on the screenplay. Then the pandemic hit, right? And everybody, even before, had been kind of screaming at me, going, you shouldn't be doing a screenplay. You should do a book first. And I'm like, oh my God, do you have any idea how much more difficult it would be for me to do this? Like, it's way more work. I don't know. Most of the people who would say that, by the way, by saying, oh, you should do the book first, they haven't done one before. So they would have no idea how difficult it would be, Aaron. In any case, though, when the pandemic hit, I mean, I'm sure everybody's minds can go back to that and kind of understand where they were, possibly just stuck, where they were in positions where they had to sort of pivot, and maybe their job was something where they were constantly around people, and now suddenly, boom, it's over, right? You're like, what do I do now? And so I just went, well, if I'm going to approach the idea of writing the books, this is a time. This is a possible opportunity and moment for me to do that. So I don't want to go on in great detail about this, but at first I'm not sure. Like, I'm gonna try this, but if after a month I'm like, this is terrible, like this sucks. This is not working. But here we are today. I found it to be illuminating, and basically more illustrations were coming into uh, into the project and more details. And suddenly I was, oh, I'll do some videos, more videos. And, oh, I have this idea. And I contact another illustrator. Hey, I have this other illustrator work on this thing, but I want you to work on this thing. It's totally different in style. Show me something. Show me something. I got an idea. So it was just really cool. Like it came out like not only a good creative release, but like I'm constantly making assessments of my own work, Aaron. I don't like to release things if I'm not finding them to be very, something that I really love and I think that's worthy. Oh, it's beautiful. It works. It's great. This is some good character designs and their character arcs and the thematic underpinnings and whatever. I'm happy to kind of say that not only has the work grown from book one, but yeah, it's kind of gotten its own legs.
What have you learned about writing novels since you started working on the Diamond Dragons books?
That's a really good question too. I mean, there's probably so much, so this would cause me to ramble forever, right? What have I learned? There's just so much, but the best way to kind of encapsulate it is that my background is in storytelling, 30 plus years of it, and a lot of it has been performance on stage for characters. And that means you have a certain level of vulnerability that you must display on stage. That's kind of the job of the actor, ironically. And this opens you up for ridicule in some ways, or being assessed by people. Like when you're very vulnerable on stage, and I don't just mean vulnerable like, oh look, we're going to put a character in bathing suit. I just mean like your emotions need to be present on stage in most cases. You're not always playing some character who's just, having a sandwich on stage and that's it. Sometimes you're doing a scene where, people are screaming at each other, right, Aaron? They're throwing things, or maybe you're doing a sword fight, whatever, right, Aaron? Theater and film these are about the day that something epic happened, not the day that you did your laundry and you drove your car to work and came home and, watched a movie and that's it. Right. So what does that mean? It means that, I'm constantly looking for opportunities to be like, okay, what's the most dramatic way that I can set the scene? And then what I'll do, Aaron, is sometimes I'll write like, I don't know, I want to say 3 to 6 versions of it. Not always. Sometimes I know, right out of the gate, this is where this needs to happen. This is who's going to be in the scene. This, I will know that. But in other cases, I'll be like, I'm not sure where I want them to have this conversation. I'll kind of give a vague example so I don't ruin anything. I wanted at one point for my main villain and my main hero to have a conversation that wasn't from afar. Because in some cases, and I'm not really revealing anything by saying this, they had conversations over what we'll call a radio. It's not a radio, but you get the idea. They had a long distance chat, right? But I needed to have one instance, and I will not say what book it was or whatever, when they needed to meet face to face. I don't want to make it like akin to Heat, with De Niro and Al Pacino, but they had to have a face to face. This is the main villain and the main hero. So you got to think about it and going, what the hell's stopping them from ripping each other apart right here and right now? I got to have it. It needs to make sense, right, Aaron?
Yeah.
So, this required me to do a lot of thinking and be like, where am I going to have it? Are they going to meet on neutral grounds? Are they going to meet over here? Are they going to do this? Is there going to be their posse in the background on both sides? So they're going, look, you all have the conversation, but nobody throw claws and wings and tails and fists or whatever. Anyway, long story short, Aaron, is like that's kind of how I approach things, and the learning is just nonstop. You just are always learning something new, and that goes from. With my 30 years background, I'm still learning things. So why not? Always learning. That's important, Even when I was fencing, I was, as a sidebar here, I was a saber fencing instructor and competitor. I have my share of golds and silvers and bronzes, like 12 plus medals, and nothing Olympic. But what am I saying here is I was always learning, always learning. There was no point where it's like, and now I know everything. That's nonsense, nonsense. I'm sure even folks like Spielberg and Lucas constantly learning as they continued making a new film or considering a new scene for something or a new treatment for something. Probably films or screenplays they wrote, we will never see because they were like, it's not good enough. I don't want to like it, So yeah, the learning is. It's like catching a waterfall with a glass, but you do it. You're always underneath. You're always trying to catch something new.
Are the Diamond Dragons books independently, traditionally, or hybrid published?
Oh no, they are just self-published. Like everything about my work is kind of my own deal. I outlined all the books, wrote them all, did all of the editing, and that includes like developmental, line editing, copy editing, proofreading, all of the aspects that are present in editing. The formatting, that's another thing a lot of people often don't really think about, like the actual formatting and where do the images go and why are they right justified or center or here or at the end of the chapter, the beginning of the chapter, whatever. And then the cover designs are primarily my own work as well. Although the very first one, I hired a team to do it because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it alone at that time. I already had so much on my plate. But then I quickly moved into pivoting to do Diamond Dragons 2 and 3 and 4, and now I'll be doing 5. 5 is actually completed, to be honest, at the time of this recording, but it is not released yet. And that'll be coming for the winter solstice of 2025. I'll be releasing another video though for summer solstice of 2025. So yeah, I pretty much do it all, and people can again visit the website to sort of like kind of learn and see like, well, what's going on with these and why are they the way that they are and so forth. Which is again diamond-dragons.com, and yeah, it's a lot to handle all on my own, but I have the background to do it, and that's kind of why I did all this stuff. If I was a bazillionaire, I suppose I would have just said, "Hey, I can give, whatever, $3,000 this, or 6,000 of this, or 12,000 this, everybody come aboard, it's fine." But I am not that guy. I'm not a high roller. I'm not Stephen King or J.K. Rowling and whatnot. 99.999% authors just, they're on their own and they don't have anything. They barely have a leg to stand on or a pocketbook to draw from. But it is what it is. Everybody has their different setups, and I feel fortunate and blessed that I do have this background, and that by utilizing that background, which again, I did all this live fight work, choreography and prop making and the costuming and the performances on stage. Like I understand production, Aaron. I understand what does it take and what does it mean to have like color palettes embedded into your work. A lot of people don't think like that. Right, Aaron? Like they'll just see a movie, oh, it's so beautiful, and da da da. They won't ever maybe stop to think and be like, why? Did you ever think about why everything was in sepia tones for those scenes, but then everything else here was basically in color, very vibrant, but all these are sepia, all this, and they'd be like, I didn't even realize that while I was watching the movie. I'm like, right, I know you didn't, but subconsciously, the director and or the production team wanted you to kind of absorb those details. So like, those are the, as they say, the devil's in the details.
One final question. In addition to the books, there is a Diamond Dragons YouTube channel. What content can be found on the YouTube channel?
Right. So it's kind of like what you would expect. Teasers to the books, which I guess a good way of saying it too is that, how when a new film pops out, they'll have some kind of teaser, usually with a voiceover or something like that. Although I'm not a multi-million dollar, outfit, I have enough tricks up my sleeve and sort of creativity to put those together on my own. So all too often I'm doing all the voice work, not always, because obviously sometimes I'll have some females that I need, so I would not dream of just pretending to be a female voice, but I will bring aboard some of these wonderful ladies who are voiceover actresses, and they've been in several of my videos before as different characters. So I'll have them record some lines, and have some other guys in there that can do other characters, this kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, most of the videos revolve around that. There's also chapter artwork teasers. And those are, again, what you would expect is they kind of display by fading in and cross-fading, zooming, whatever, different pieces of artwork. Not all of it that in each book. I feel it would be silly to, show 100% of it and from every book. You'd be there for a while, too, because most of the books have I want to say about 100 is kind of what's going on for most of them. Some have a little bit less, some have more, whatever. But there's like 100 illustrations per book, so it's a lot. And in some other cases, I did some interviews of other artists in the past, so that's a kind of a departure from like my own work. I would often do interviews, not unlike what we're doing here, but I usually do them as video ones. So there's a lot of content, I would say, for people to draw from in terms of if they wanted to figure out if they're like, wow, this looks really great, or if they're like, nah, I don't like dragons, they suck, I don't care about any of this. So again, everybody's got their own tastes and their own desires on what they want to see. Some people like sci-fi, some people like romantic comedies, and some people prefer whatever, fantasy, doesn't really matter. It's just all there for people to kind of understand what's going on in this series, and that it's kind of a lot more than books. And I'll just finalize by saying this is there's a lot of original music. Again, what I'm saying when I say original is like music that I brought aboard composers to make for the series, often which I've kind of sent them, what is it that I want to hear? So I would sort of orchestrate the themes to a certain point, and then I kind of go down a rabbit hole with those composers and say, obviously add your own creativity, but here's what I want for this thing, or oh, here's a little, four chord ditty, if you will, that I've kind of put together here. Tell me what you think of it, and can you incorporate it? So I know that's a long story to say, but yeah, there's a considerable amount more work that's gone into Diamond Dragons than simply tap, 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 typing out words on a keyboard.
Matthew, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an amazing guest.
Oh, great. Did I really appear though? I I have not appeared. I am only being heard, right?
I enjoyed interviewing Matthew about the Diamond Dragons project. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2025, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.